I am the self that dwells in the heart of every mortal creature. I am the beginning, the lifespan, and the end of all. I am the radiant sun among the life givers. I am the mind. I am the consciousness in the living. I am death that snatches all. I also am the source of all that shall be born. I am time without end. I am the sustainer. My face is everywhere. I am the beginning, middle, and the end in creation. I am the knowledge of things spiritual. I am glory, prosperity, beautiful speech, memory, intelligence, steadfastness, and forgiveness. I am the divine seed of all lives. In this world, nothing animate or inanimate exists without me. I am the strength of the strong. I am the purity of the good. I am the knowledge of the knower. There is no limit to my divine manifestations. Whatever in this world is powerful, beautiful, or glorious, that you may know to have come forth from a fraction of my power and glory.
Thank you, Bob. This morning, I'd like to remind all of you about the opportunity to worship through your giving. And there is a reason that the offering is part of our worship service. And so I remind you that you can continue to donate to the Dakota Unitarian Universalist Church online or with your pledge. And please continue to give to this congregation so that a liberal and free religion can continue to have a foot in this community. Thank you. Today is going to be a participatory sermon, and that means things will be a little bit risky. I cannot promise that everything will be wrapped up in a nice bow when it's over. I can, however, guarantee that it will be interesting. Sometimes I hear people say that God is not doing a very good job. God has fallen asleep at the wheel. This is no way to run a railroad. And sometimes it does seem that the world is a mess, like God just is not paying attention. If God is paying attention, if God is manipulating everything on high, that would mean that God is capricious, arbitrary, careless, and cruel. Good things happen to bad people, and bad things happen to good people. And perhaps the problem is that we have expectations of God, unexamined expectations. So often, when we are unexpectedly disappointed by someone, we find that they have not met expectations that we have for them. And these are expectations we did not know we had until they have failed them. So maybe this situation, when people feel let down by God, there may be expectations they haven't examined. You might not even believe in God. Agnostics and atheists have a point when they list the many reasons that there can't be a God. The fact that God is doing such a poor job makes arguing for God's existence difficult to do. And given the state of the world, how can a thinking person declare that there is any supreme being? If you stand in this camp, this sermon is still for you. When we look at the world reasonably, when we put our faith in the intellect of humans and affirm the commonality of all people, it doesn't take long for us to be discouraged. So ask yourself, where have you placed your faith? What is it that is bigger than you? Today, I'll be using the G word, primarily because it is handy. There are other terms I prefer for the divine, the mystery, the universe, the light, the one. Theology for UUs often involves translating what the speaker says to fit our own understanding of truth and meaning. So today, please translate in whatever method best suits you, and I'll be doing the same. So let's start with the acknowledgement that we cannot define God. We can instead describe our experiences. The old metaphors, king, shepherd, father, priest, potter, wind, judge, those were all descriptive ways that people of old used to express their understanding of God. And the words that we choose make a difference for us. Today in 21st century America, we don't have an accurate reference for words like king and lord and shepherd. But metaphors are a way to describe our experience. And at the same time, metaphors also determine much of our personal narrative. The outdated old image of the man in the sky, usually an angry and powerful old man, doesn't work for most people. That image gets in the way. Some of the contemporary mental representations used today involve relationships, such as parent, guide, coach, midwife. Some have suggested that God is not a pronoun. Instead, God is a verb. In this age of quantum physics, some think of God as the space between the particles in an atom. The Star Wars concept of the Force is useful for others. Pantheism goes with the idea that everything altogether is God. And Panentheism is a little different in that it believes everything has God in it, and yet God is still bigger than the sum of the parts. Many understand God to be a benevolent being or force that is both intimate and transcendent, that interacts with people in the world in ways that change us and that change it. The old definition of God as omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, and immutable is too limiting. All this God stuff gets so nuanced, and necessarily so. We aren't even going to scratch the surface of defining God today, maybe in another sermon. What I do want to talk about is that God is a human construct. And no matter how you believe in God or don't believe in God, you have constructed that image. And often as we move through life, we find that our construct is not big enough for the real world. We have to change it and tweak it, throw it out altogether. So today I invite you to join in and participate as we examine a piece of this construction. So let's start with a question. And Kelly has graciously, thank you, Kelly, volunteered to write our notes on a whiteboard. So please raise your hand, physically or digitally, and you'll be called on to share your thoughts. So in just one or two words, what is God's job? Your word won't cover the full description, but when we put them all together, we should have a pretty good idea. So if each of you that are comfortable share a word or two, what is it that God is supposed to do? And Kelly, I will let you call on people and scribe in a way that is comfortable for you. So folks, what is God's job?
I believe that people can type in their own if they want to do it, or they can unmute themselves and tell me what to type. Either way.
Can't get my whole view. Oh, well, am I recognized? I can't tell. I can't get, for some reason, get my whole view up here. I was going to say evolution.
That's a great answer. Thank you.
I will say life force.
I will say God does not have a job.
Which is a good thing because we aren't paying very much.
Uh-huh.
Other thoughts?
Kind of going off of the idea of pantheism or panentheism, I will say inclusion.
And I would say historically, a civilizing influence.
I would also invite you to think about what is God's job for you in relationship to you specifically.
The God I'm excited to believe in is one that's a cultivator and gardener.
I would say that God's job for me is to help me keep loving.
These are terrific. Please share with us a few more.
I would say God's job is comfort.
For me, to still think there are things that I do not see, the mystery, that there is a mystery. Did I say that so that it makes any sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. And I see that there are a few in the chat that are listed as well.
Going off that, Alice, I'd say the unknown.
Kind of building on that, I would also say a greater awareness, or kind of sparking a greater awareness.
I would say to help bring inner peace.
I see also that there's listed connection and commitment to this living tradition and to each other from the chat.
I believe that connection and commitment was part of your chalice lighting.
It was. So I see things on this board such as God's job is, God doesn't have a job. It's about the unknown, inclusion, sparking greater awareness, a civilizing influence, encouraging with strength and hope. God is a life force, a cultivator, a gardener. The mystery, things I cannot see or know. God is helping me keep loving, comfort, evolution, love, to help bring inner peace, connection, and commitment to this tradition and to each other. Are there any other things that folks would like to add as far as how they understand God's job?
I go through, it's like, for some people, I feel like God is someone that I can blame or for what's happening to me.
That is fabulous. Thank you. A responsible party.
Oh. One word that came to mind was patsy. Well, the scapegoat, that's, I mean, yeah, that's.
That's grand. That's grand. Thank you. I think of how many people I have worked with as a chaplain who will tell me that they do not believe in God because when they were young, they prayed that God would keep their grandmother alive, and their grandmother died. So therefore, God does not exist. Which I certainly understand from an emotional perspective, and intellectually, it just doesn't make much sense.
Well,
but you got to have somebody to blame, I suppose.
yeah, it seems to me that when a child growing up in when people are telling you God takes care of you, put your hands in God, you know, it's a very simplistic way, because the way you're looking at it is from a child's point of view. And so that understanding that you're in God's hands, all that kind of stuff, and then so it becomes more difficult, especially from a child, it seems to me. But those who believe that God is going to take care of you will of course be disappointed.
And I decided not to spend a lot of time on this, but this fits really well with Fowler's stages of faith, and particularly in stages 2 and 3, which are pretty simplistic. And most US adults probably get stuck in the 3rd stage of faith, which is very much like that. That God's job is to do what I pray for God to do. And if I am good, God should do what I request. And if I am bad, God will not. And that doesn't work out so well in the real world. I will also just add, within Fowler's stages of faith, which is that third stage, which is sort of a bubblegum God, as some people refer to it, many ministers do not like to encourage their people to move beyond stage 3. Because once people start getting into stage 4, which is a bit more, it's not quite as neat, they start losing volunteers to do the work of the church. People start thinking a little more for themselves. And so it's easier to get people to do stuff if we can keep them in stage 3. Okay, I have a second question. This might seem a little bit like a tangent, but that's okay. I want you to give it your best. So take a moment, and I want you to think of somebody you love, somebody you adore, someone who means a great deal to you. Do you have that person? And again, in a word or two, what do you hope for regarding this person? What kind of life do you want them to have? So one example might be fulfilling work. So if you would just name for me, so that Kelly can put on the whiteboard, some of the things that you hope for this person that you love.
Freedom from anxiety.
Okay. What else?
Happiness.
Yeah.
Purpose.
What do you hope for folks around love? Or money, or community, or sex, or health? What do you want for them?
Meaningful choices.
A long, healthy life.
Joy.
What kind of health do you hope for them?
good mental health.
Okay, good mental health.
Inner peace.
What do you want for them around community?
A sense of belonging.
What kind of sex life do you hope for them? I know it's church, we can't say these things, but what do you hope?
Meaningful connections with other people.
Intimacy and play.
Could you say that again? I missed that, please. Oh, intimacy. Okay. And play.
And
Wonderful.
play.
That's awesome. That's cool. What do you hope for them about money?
That it doesn't matter too much. More than the other things.
Security.
Yeah, it doesn't get poisonous.
Okay, so it doesn't get poisonous, and yet that they also have enough. So some security.
Balance.
Independence.
Okay.
Freedom from tyranny.
How about for troubles and problems and tribulations? What are you hope for that person around those sort of things? Given that they'll probably happen at some point.
Fortitude.
Patience.
Someone to lean on.
These are terrific.
Support. Well, that would be someone to lean on too, I suppose.
I think you missed fortitude. I heard that.
Acceptance, so that they don't resent having had whatever the problems are.
Mm-hmm.
Forgiveness.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Mm.
Figure out how to use the challenges as a tool to improve an outcome. Which I guess learn from the tough stuff. Growth.
Resilience.
Oh, good. Resilience. Think again about this person that you absolutely adore. What do you really hope for them? What kind of life do you want for them?
The life they want.
Ah. So if we look at this list about what do you hope for regarding the people that you care about, balance, purpose, fortitude, intimacy and play, patience, independence and freedom from tyranny, good mental health, freedom from anxiety, joy, Meaningful work, meaningful connection with others, forgiveness, inner peace, meaningful choices, a sense of belonging, acceptance, happiness, money that doesn't matter too much, and yet they have a sense of security, a long, healthy life, that they're able to approach challenges as a tool, someone to lean on, some support, fulfilling and a joyful life, a life that they want, a long, happy life. I wouldn't mind a life like that. So I want you to think again back to this idea of God, however you want to define God. Is it possible that God is at least as loving as you are? So that all these good things that you wish for your person, is it possible that that's exactly what God wants for you? This whole idea of God's will. That there it is right there, that Kelly's typed it up on the screen. So God's will or God's wish for you, and that certainly does not automatically make it so. So just as you desire all these positive things for your person, you aren't able to make it all come to fruition, even if your person is a young child. But you can influence and teach, and perhaps in some cases you can intervene. You still can't make it all happen. Our universe just doesn't work that way. And I want to take a second and say something about the hard, painful, terrible, bad stuff that happens. So there are those who are earlier in their faith development who think that everything that happens is controlled by God. And we talked about this a little earlier, sort of the third stage in Fowler's development, where God is up there pulling the strings, the great puppeteer in the sky, puppeteer. And these folks comfort themselves with the idea that God has a plan, and this horrible thing is part of that plan. As a chaplain, if I encounter someone who is reassured by that notion, that's reassuring and comforting to them, that even these horrible things are part of God's plan, I don't take that away and I don't challenge that. That would be cruel. Usually, though, when I encounter a person in crisis and they tell me that this horrible thing, that God has a plan, they say it more as a question, or with the intonation of, I think I'm supposed to say this. I don't believe it right now. Maybe the chaplain can help me believe it. So when the pronouncement of a divine plan is no longer believed, as a chaplain, I work with these people to find something that makes more sense. And what we often come up is with the idea that God can bring about goodness from even the worst situation, that God doesn't cause these calamities, that God doesn't take a partner or a child or inflict illness. That those are things that happen in our world and in our universe. But instead, that God can help us find meaning in even our worst experiences. God can support us, that the positive is able to come from a negative event, that it's something more than just a silver lining in the storm. But if we're willing to toy with this paradigm of God being invested in what is best for us, we can begin to explore what that might look like. And so this is where the different metaphors of God start to come in. For example, those who might think of God as a parent, we might want to tweak that a little bit and say that perhaps God is more of a parent of an adult child rather than the parent of a small toddler. That makes a difference. Kelly, you talked about your baby now being, I think you said it 30? Yeah, 32. Okay, 32. So this is no longer a baby. And you have to treat her as an autonomous being. And yet I'm guessing everything that we put on that whiteboard is what you wish for her. And you still will do everything possible to make that happen and yet respect her choices. Understanding and also wanting what's best. Or perhaps the idea of the divine as a guide works better. Someone who knows the trails and offers helpful advice. That trail over there, that's scenic and easy. This one is dangerous and hard. Oh, look out for that quicksand. Stop and drink in this view. Maybe a guide who's been this way and can perhaps give us a few pointers. Or a midwife, assessing and assisting in the birth and delivery of something new. Or maybe the metaphor of a coach, encouraging and challenging and setting out the necessary rules of the game. So the next question I have for you is a two-parter. What is an image that you use for thinking of the divine or God or the mystery? What is it that's bigger than you? And then the second part of this question, what is one of the ways that this conceptualization of God might communicate with you or for you? So if your image of God might be of a midwife, maybe one of the things that a midwife does is remind the mother that eventually this labor will pass. That it's not always going to hurt like this. It won't always be this hard. And there's something that will come at the end that should be good. But think for a minute about metaphors or images of God that have been meaningful for you, and what does that communicate to you? So what are your thoughts, your experiences? I happen to know you're all brilliant.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, no, would you give us our instructions again?
Sure. So I'd like you to think about images or metaphors for God or the divine that actually are meaningful for you. And what within that metaphor might, okay, we've got God as a river. And what are the things that God as a river might bring to you? Is that the idea of time passing? Is that the idea of change? Is that the idea of continuity? What does that mean, God as a river? So whatever it is that you tend to think of for the divine, what does that metaphor actually mean in real life to you? Does that make sense? If not, I'm happy to talk more.
I wrote God as a river. Sorry. I wrote God as a river because of the Peter Mayer song, but I also really relate to the whole idea that he has in that song. But I don't want to go into all of the details right now.
That's our closing song, so you'll hear it.
Perfect. Okay. Others, how else do you envision God?
This image is cracking me up. I'm lactose intolerant, but I imagine God as a farmer with the milk from a cow where I've set the table. So a God of hospitality and sustenance.
That's a great example. Thank you.
I had this conversation with Stephanie when Stephanie was acting as a chaplain for me in crisis. And I talked about how I didn't want to have to be on my best behavior with God. I could maybe forget, please, when I asked to pass the milk. And that type of casual intimacy is really important to me, to not feel afraid of God.
So a God that's accepting and you can actually be who you are. instead of always on your best behavior.
Andrea, would you be able to repeat what you said in the beginning? I got God as a farmer, but I was having other technical difficulties, so I didn't get the rest.
I'll be happy to type it in.
And I also heard God as someone who is truly accepting, and you can actually just be yourself. You don't have to be on your best behavior. So that was fabulous. What else?
A mystery.
Whoops. What does that mean as a mystery?
Unknowable.
When I think about God, I think about this saying, I found God in myself and I loved her. I loved her fiercely. For me, the goddess, all the images of the goddess, and there are so many, are all wrapped up in my concept of who I am now, that I cherish being female, and that I've let go of so many restrictions that have come from the patriarchal world because of that knowledge.
So the whole concept of goddess,
right,
and powerful female, and what that actually means,
right,
and how that is different than God as the old man in the sky.
right.
Lovely.
I think of like a higher consciousness, or an increasing awareness, rather than a metaphor of something tangible, I guess.
We could go on and on and on. I just find this fascinating. And I'd like to thank you for this. I have really enjoyed hearing your thoughts and your metaphors and your ideas and your challenges. Thank you for speaking up and sharing these with the congregation and with me. So today's sermon is just an appetizer. There is so much that we haven't covered, but I think we've made a nice start. And if I've gotten you to think a little bit about God and theology in a new way, then I would say I've at least done my job for this morning. And I recognize that today's sermon is pretty simplistic. It covers just one tiny little aspect of how we might relate to God. We have not touched at all on God's expectations of us, of our responsibilities to live with humility and justice and mercy, for starters. But this simple talk reminds us to examine our unconscious expectations. We can challenge and change theology that does not work for us. We can listen to the ideas of others and stretch our perceptions and help us fine-tune what we do believe. As Unitarian Universalists, we are called to evolve theologically, and our responsible search for truth and meaning requires us to constantly toy with new ideas and to examine how well our beliefs fit with our real life. And just as an aside here, it is precisely for that reason that I chose Unitarian Universalism. When I left my former denomination, I did a very methodical search of where I wanted to be. And when I learned about Unitarian Universalism as a non-creedal faith, it gave me the opportunity to have a theology that could change and I could still keep my integrity. In many other denominations, there is a set creed, and if I wanted to be a minister in that congregation, I would need to swear by that creed. And that would mean either that I am stuck with it, or if I want to keep my credentials as a minister, I kind of have to fudge or just flat out lie if I want to keep my credentials, and yet those things no longer fit for me. So I like And I was very attracted to Unitarian Universalists' expectation that my theology will change and that is part of my integrity, is keeping up with that. So we get to ask ourselves often, do our expectations need adjusting? So please continue to ask yourself what new metaphors you can try on, and how do those metaphors impact your relationship with the divine and how you live. And just thank you. Thank you so much for participating in this service today. I have some new ideas to examine, and I trust that you do too. May our community continue to challenge us and encourage us, and may we try on new considerations. May our discussions continue to enlighten and enliven us. May our theology continue to evolve and surprise us with unexpected insights, and may our faith continue to unfold, adding joy and meaning to our lives. Amen and amen. We probably don't have a lot of time for congregational reflection, but we did have an opportunity for people to share their thoughts. Chuck, I think you have a closing hymn for us?
Yes. And this is Peter Mayer's God is a River.
Perfect.
In the ever-shifting waters of the river of this life, I was swimming, seeking comfort. I was wrestling ways to find a boulder I could cling to, a stone to hold me fast, where I let the fretful waters of this river around me pass. So I found an anchor, a blessed resting place, a trusty rock I called my Savior. There I would be safe from the river and its dangers, and I proclaimed my rock divine, and I prayed to it protect me, and the rock replied, God is a river, not just a stone. God is a wild raging rapids and a slow meandering flow. God is a deep and narrow passage, a peaceful sandy shore. God is a river swimmer, so let go. Still I clung to my rock tightly with conviction in my arms, never looking at the stream to keep my mind from thoughts of harm. But the river kept on coming, kept on tugging at my legs, till at last my fingers faltered and I was swept away. So I'm going with the flow now, these relentless twists and bends, acclimating to the motion and a sense of being led. And this river is like my body now, it carries me along through the ever-changing scenes and by the rocks that sing this song. God is a river, not just a stone. God is a wild raging rapids and a slow meandering flow. God is a deep and narrow passage, a peaceful sandy shore. God is a river swimmer, so let go. God is the river swimmer. So let go.
Again, thank you. It is always to me such a privilege to be with you folks. And I will miss you until September of next year. I thank you so much for this opportunity just to toy a little bit with this discussion of what is God and what is God's job and what does that actually mean for us. And extinguishing our chalice. Ours be a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space. Its shrine, the good heart. Its creed, all truth. Its ritual, works of love. Its profession, faith and divine living. May we carry each other in our hearts until we meet again. Blessed be.